Pinkerton's Ghosts is a horror anthology podcast by Superversive Radio, with no affiliation with any detective agency, person, real or imagined, or the dark forces of Outre Terre. It is not intended for children.
Every Control's first recording has to explain how they got the job, whether fair or foul. The first thing to know is that Control had no idea what I was doing. In fact, she would have done everything in her power to stop me. Mother knew that I was stubborn, and she knew I had a lot of ideas of how things should have been done. How could she have predicted I would defy her so completely? I had grown up with no father to divide my attention, and she had involved me in her work for as long as I can remember. We were as close as a mother and daughter had ever been, made ever closer with the added responsibility of an entire organization tying us together. Not once had I shied away from the destiny I had been raised for. No. Instead, I embraced it. It changed when I was 15. The time had come, she explained to me, to see the bigger cases. The red folders. The ones that were more gruesome. Paranormal Pinkertons dealt with far more than monsters under the bed. More than farmers being tormented by UFOs. More than fey mischief. In time, I came to realize that my least favorite phrase was, "We'll observe and report further." A troll devoured 2 children. The bridge closed off. "We'll observe and report further." A gremlin had begun wreaking havoc on local streetlights, which led to several car pileups after suddenly turning traffic lights the wrong color. 3 people died. "We'll observe and report further." A Bigfoot had been sighted repeatedly at nearby campgrounds, generally mistaken for a bear. It had eaten several pets, and was strongly suspected in the disappearance of one hiker, given the state of the gruesome remains found. "We'll observe and report further." Of course I understand now. Of course I know better. But I did not back then, and my frustration came out in argument upon argument with her. "It's complicated," she always told me. Complicated? We were not the Enterprise, and we did not follow some vague prime directive. I thought our job was to protect people from supernatural threats, not catalog their sightings like we were bird watchers. With the powder keg of my own frustration built up within me, it was only a matter of time before something lit the fuse. Hawk's case file was the match. My mother did not force me to read every case file with her, so when she sat me down and asked me to look at it, I knew to expect something strange. There was a lot you could tell about a detective from their files, and Hawk's was no exception. His soft, raspy voice always made him sound like he was on the verge of falling asleep as he spoke. It started out like almost every other case. Rumors of mysterious, possibly paranormal activity in a small New England town, Cape Orland, and Control had sent Detective Hawk to look more closely into the disturbances. The investigation led him to find that most of the sightings were centered around the property of a single family. Getting inside is easy enough if you have wire cutters and the patience to cut through a fence, he had narrated. I figured it was better to start with the woods surrounding the house anyway. The man who owns it is a rich bastard, so his family owns everything around it. And I'd rather stay as far away from a guy with lots of guns as I can, if I can help it. Well, a guy with his reputation. Anyway, found the proof I was looking for. Saw the Satyr. Daughter was sleeping at first, but on closer inspection, the old girl was dead for at least 4 hours. Had a bullet wound clean right in the chest, and managed to get away long enough to crawl under a tree and die. Wouldn't be surprised if they thought she was a deer or something. It's impossible to say, really. So there's a rift somewhere in the middle of God knows how many acres of woods, and what's coming out may or may not be getting hunted for sport. As it stands, best thing to do now is stay out of it. Rifts close on their own most of the time anyway, and if it's out in the middle of the woods somewhere, the chances of something dangerous running into people is low. If they do, looks like these people can handle themselves. Far as I can tell, the Satyr is probably a fluke. Detective Ryan Hawk signing out. Of course, I was familiar with what a rift was by then. A place where the separation between the normal human realm and the fairy realm had weakened. That is not entirely perfect, but it is as good as I can get without a PhD thesis paper. We do not know why they appear, whether it was done intentionally or just some natural phenomenon, or if it was possible to figure out how long they stay open, if they even stop being there at all. There were places like Ireland that seemed to have them appear disproportionately. I knew how dangerous they were. Unlike the occasional dragon or feral werewolf, fairies do not operate on instinct or bloodlust. They were smart, sentient, and were known to retaliate in response to even the slightest perceived provocation. Like humans murdering creatures from their own realm, for instance. How could Detective Hawk end his mission with, "Let's wait and see what happens"? Even if the Satyr was an accident that would not necessarily matter to the Fae. And then, who knew if it would even be revenge that was limited strictly to the family that did it? While contact with them could be chaotic, at best. The general consensus was that the fair folk were petty assholes. Any human unlucky enough to run into something more dangerous than a Satyr would be at risk. But that is not the job of Control. Our job is to give out assignments and file the reports that come back. They place their trust in us, and we have to trust the detectives. If Hawk thought we should wait and see, then we would wait and see. That was how my mother saw it. I thought about it a lot that night. Hawk's sleepy, bored drawl replayed over and over again in my head. He sounded almost bored, like he did not care. His cases always made him sound like he had just rolled out of bed, 2 seconds before he made a recording. How could I be expected to trust someone like that? Screw it, I said to myself, and I grabbed my mother's notes on the way out. Hindsight is 20/20, and my impression of Hawk was so obviously wrong that I am embarrassed to admit how I felt about him. Detective Hawk keeps some of the most meticulous notes of any Pinkerton I have ever seen, often submitting pages upon pages of supplementary material to Control that were not strictly required of him. It gave me something to read on the bus to Cape Orland. The owner of the property was one Killian McCarthy, 44 years old and famous in the circle of big game hunting. He had started out in the woods of his hometown, winning a local hunting competition at the age of 10, and only entering bigger and bigger ones since. When the North American game had started to bore him, he had packed up and moved to South Africa to try his hand at exotic animals. That seemed to satisfy him, because he had stayed there for 20 years before finally returning to inherit the old family estate north of Boston. An estate that had both a large family home and 200 acres of surrounding forest. Other than that, there was nothing of note to make him seem particularly nefarious or altruistic. There were rumors that he had been involved in some illegal poaching while he lived in South Africa, sporadic accusations of rhino hunting and the like. But it was never backed up with proof and could have easily been the result of jealousy over his success. He maintained that everything he did was 100% legal, and moreover, he was doing a service. His kills were donated to local villages to be used for food and hide. I have never been a fan of hunting for sport. The thought of taking a gun or bow and arrow to take the life of a living animal for sport makes me sick. I do not think I could look at a breeding creature and have it in me to take their life. On the other hand, I also eat bacon and send agents to hunt the monsters of the Outer Terror, so I do not think I have the moral high ground. Just never saw the appeal. When I got to Cape Orland, I planned my next move in a small bar that smelled of the ocean, the type of local place that thought that hanging an anchor on the wall counted as ambiance. It had a good mix of locals and passers-by, so I did not stick out. Chewing at the end of my pen, I sat at the corner of the bar. Just as Hawk had said, getting in would be easy enough. Any hardware store would have all the supplies I needed to get past the fence if I even needed them. If I scoped out the perimeter at night, I would probably find the point in the fence Hawk had already cut to get in, and I could just bend the wires that he had put back into place on his way out. Assuming he had bothered. It might even be easier than that. What to do afterward was a little fuzzier, but I had a general idea of what I considered a successful mission. One way was to find where the rift actually was, and provide some evidence for it. If I presented that to my mother, she would agree that, knowing exactly where it was, there was no reason not to do something about it immediately. I knew that plan was unrealistic, given the size of the place, so the next best idea I had was to get proof that the McCarthy family was actively hunting the creatures that were leaving the rift. There was no way that would not warrant some kind of response. The bartender came up to me then and asked for my ID. I fumbled one of my fake IDs deeper into my backpack. The bartender gave me a look like he expected a fake ID. I searched my bag for it anyway. We used the same machines as the DMV. I could pass. I had not thought he would ask as long as I did not order alcohol. My stuttering excuses were cut short. Hey, bartender, it's fine. She's with me. The man who slid onto a stool next to me handed his ID across to the bartender. There was a quick flash of familiarity when the bartender looked back up at the guy. Something about the name stuck with him, though I could not see it from where I was. It was being blocked by his shoulder as he hunched inward, resting his arms on the counter. Liam, of course. What'll you have? The lager at the end. You can get her a soda if you're that worried about it. The bartender turned to attend the tap. Liam focused the full force of his attention onto me. He was a big guy, broad-shouldered with long auburn hair he had pulled up into a ponytail, and teeth so white I could swear the light was reflecting off them. I realized with absolute shock that he was the spitting image of his father, Killian McCarthy. It took me a moment to recover. Cape Orland was a pretty small town. So small, in fact, that as incredible as it felt like, no, I could imagine that this small pub could easily be a local hangout spot. The fact he had stopped in was not shocking. You're a bit cuter than the local girls. What's your name? Where'd you come from? The more shocking thing was that he was trying to chat me up. I had never cared that much about my appearance. I took care of myself, and I like to think I was not ugly, but the world I was being groomed to take over would reduce me to nothing but a faceless voice behind a computer screen. No one ever meets control. Not really. I gave him my name. He held out his hand. Liam McCarthy. I shook his hand. It was square and large, callous fingertips rubbing their rough skin against my palm, before he leaned in with his legs spread and an elbow resting on his knee. I swallowed. He was a very large and strong man. You're being pretty friendly. He waved a hand dismissively. Just curious. Like I said, you don't look from around here. Of course, I'm not really from around here either, I guess. But this town doesn't seem like the type that has girls stopping in by themselves regularly, you know? How old are you? 18. I'm a freshman at Amherst, and midterms killed me, so I kind of just wanted to go wherever and take a break, you know? The lie came easily enough, not that it was a particularly good lie. My hope was that I said it so casually that Liam would not even think to question whether or not it made sense. When he nodded, the gamble seemed like it paid off. His logger was placed next to him. "Well, this is as wherever as anywhere else," he agreed, taking a sip. "Nice enough town, gets a lot less tourists than some of the bigger oceanside cities, so it's good to unwind here." "Where'd you say you were from? You mentioned being new here?" "South Africa, but my old man grew up around here." He narrowed his eyes at me suspiciously. "Wait, are you telling me you don't know who I am? You haven't heard of Killian McCarthy?" I swallowed. My eyes widened. What? No. He burst into laughter, slapping his knee. "Hey, relax. I'm just kidding. My dad would have meant it, though, I can tell you that. He thinks he's God's gift to outdoor life. I think he's just full of it myself." A Coke was put next to me, and I smiled. "You think so, huh?" "I love him, but you know how annoying it is when parents get overbearing. Who doesn't?" "Oh, tell me about it," I agreed, taking a sip. "My mother can be the absolute worst. I didn't even tell her I was coming here because I knew she'd lose it. The best way to keep up a lie, I figured, was to put as much truth into it as possible." "So what were you thinking of doing? Hitting the beach?" I raised an eyebrow, taking a sip of my drink to buy myself time. This was too good of an opportunity to pass up, but I had not planned on what to say to him. So far, Liam seemed so nice and personable that it was almost hard to remember that I was supposed to have ulterior motives. "I was thinking of going, hiking," I lied. "Hiking?" I blushed. "I know that sounds strange, but I've always liked the woods, and I heard there are some nice forests around here. I figured it'd be quiet. You know, nice." I stared at him. Liam tilted his head slightly, the rust red of his hair long and silky enough to brush against his shoulder from gravity. For a moment, I held my breath. He grinned. "Well, there are some very nice woods around here," he agreed. "Most of them are owned by my family, though." "Really?" "You're in luck." He leaned forward again, pushing his drink away. "My dad is going out hunting tomorrow. I was thinking of going with him. My sister usually comes and helps with the equipment and whatnot, but she's about this close to giving birth now." He pinched his pointer finger and thumb together. "And I bet the old man wouldn't mind a little help. If you're not squeamish about hunting, you want to come?" In any other situation, I would have been kind of appalled at the audacity to invite a stranger on a hunting trip expecting them to agree to being alone with a group of strange men where no one could hear their screams was a move that could backfire. Easily. He was lucky. I grabbed a napkin and pulled a pen from my pocket, scribbling a number down. "I'd love to," I answered, sliding it over. "Here's my number." I was not much of an outdoors person, having been raised with the expectation that the majority of my work would be done in front of a computer monitor, or digging through files. But even I had to appreciate the atmosphere the afternoon I left to go meet Liam at the chain-link fence separating the McCarthy property from the rest of the town. It was surprisingly warm despite it being a New England January. Cold enough for a jacket, but not cold enough that I needed more. There was a certain simplistic beauty to the way the woods looked, stripped bare of their leaves with their thin branches casting finger-like shadows across the frost-dusted ground. When Liam saw me, he raised a hand high in greeting. There was another man with him, his father. "Hello. My dad was just laughing about how he didn't think you'd show up. This here's the old goat himself." He slapped Liam on the back. "Oh, come on, kid. Can you blame me for teasing you a little getting a girl that fast? As if my boy would have any trouble." From the photos I had seen of Killian, I knew he would be a tall man. It had not prepared me for seeing him in person. He was long and almost willowy, as if he had been stretched out like taffy. He might have looked like a nerd with his large, square rec specs if not for the fact that he carried a large hunting rifle. He put a hand on his son's head, grin as blindingly bright as Liam's was crooked. His eyes were the opposite to his son's. He was sizing me up, calculating something. "Thanks for letting her tag along, old man," Liam said, "and thank you for agreeing." "So, this one actually believed you, son?" "Believed what?" I stated. Liam waved a hand vaguely, as if he was telling him to shut up. Unfortunately, Killian did not get the message in time for it to work. Whatever he said was interrupted by his son going, "Wait!" Glancing sideways at me, the son put a hand on his shoulder. "1 second," he assured him. I shrugged off his hand after he got us a fair distance away from them. "I am starting to reconsider going on a hunting trip with 2 men I don't know," I told him. "So can you please just tell me what is apparently so unbelievable?" More so than the strangeness of what was happening. I had expected that, after all. I was struck by how nonchalant Liam still looked about the entire thing. Rubbing the back of his neck, he smiled sheepishly. Okay, I'll admit it. I don't normally strike up conversations with attractive women in bars and invite them on hunting trips. I'm more the kind of person to do dinner and a movie. I tried to look unimpressed even as my face turned a light shade of pink. Yeah? Thing is, I was afraid telling you would make you think I'm crazy, and you wouldn't come, he explained. Truth is, we're hunting some very exotic animals and, well, they have a soft spot for women. When my sister tagged along, they'd come up to her like puppies, but she's so far along that hiking around the woods isn't really appealing to her anymore, and, well, everyone else in this town thinks we're a bit off in the head. So you needed to find someone who wasn't in the know. Pretty much. I glared at him. It was a fine line I needed to cross. I could not appear too eager, and therefore suspicious, but also not reject the idea entirely. Covert undercover operations like this were not part of my curriculum as the heir, and I was already straining my own personal sense of disbelief agreeing to go with strangers deep into the woods. Luckily, the fact that Liam actually believed the woman would do this to begin with was proof that he was fairly easy to manipulate. It did not take a mastermind to know what buttons to push. So you're just flattering me because you couldn't get anyone else to do it? What? Oh no, not at all. I just consider myself extremely lucky. Okay. I bit my lip. So what exactly is this thing everyone thinks you're absolutely insane to talk about? It's hard to explain, he admitted. It's a creature on the more mythical side of things. Bigfoot. No, think more goat. Satyr. It was out before I could stop myself. Liam blinked. Wow, good guess. My eyes widened. Well, I read a lot of Greek mythology, especially when I was younger, I lied. He did not even blink. Was he stupid? Or just that single-minded? He laughed. Holding out his hand, he raised an eyebrow at me in a silent challenge. Look, I know I have no right to say this. Totally understand if you back out. But I promise, if you come with, you are going to see something unbelievable. And maybe it was the way he tilted his head slightly, giving a nervous grin with just a few too many teeth as he sheepishly rubbed the back of his neck. But I might have believed him even if I was not acting anyway. There was a small stream running north to south on their property. The source was a popular place for them to hang out. Liam explained their plan. They'd come right up to Shannon like bears to honey, he said. So if you saw them so often, why haven't you found any photographic proof yet? I asked. We don't know, he confessed as he set up the hunting blind. Seems like whenever we take a photograph, they don't show up on it. Corpses don't last more than a few hours. Then you blink, and they're just gone. Which made sense. The farther a fey creature went from a rift, the weaker their hold on this reality. They could keep themselves tethered to our side of the divide through sheer force of will. But if you kill one, obviously they're not going to last very long. You'll scare them away, Killian interrupted. Stop looking in our direction. Hold on a sec, Dad. Here. Liam tossed something to me. It hit my open hands. I fumbled with it, before I turned the plastic box and read the label. Apple slices? They did not exactly look fresh. In fact, they were starting to brown a little. It was hard to see Liam and Killian, considering they were camouflaged in the bushes, but I could hear the nonchalance in his voice. They're half-goat. They like 'em, he answered. Shannon feeds it to them. So I look down at it, sit here and wait for one of them to walk up to me by bribing it with apples. It's worked for us this far, Killian answered. Besides, this is a good place to stake out game anyway. Fresh water source. They'll come here for a drink eventually. The important thing is staying quiet. If one comes up, don't make any sudden movements. You'll spook him. And if anything happens, don't worry. I don't miss. As long as I'm not the one you're aiming at, I answered. Huh. Well, you haven't given me a reason to, he answered back, laughing at his own joke as my face started to turn white. I do not know how familiar anyone listening to this is with the act of hunting. But as I quickly learned, it is actually boring as hell. It is an extremely sedate pastime, punctuated by short bursts of excitement. Hours sitting under a tree with a blind while you wait for something to show up. The only difference, in my case, was that I sat out in the open. I took my spot near a stream, sitting cross-legged with my fingers tapping a staccato, irritated rhythm against my knee. I started to regret my plan by that point. Not because I had come to my senses about the stupidity of it all, but because it felt pointless. I was supposed to be searching for evidence of a rift, and instead I was being taxed with sitting still for God knows how long. I decided I needed to make some sort of excuse. It did not matter what. I was hungry, I was freezing, I felt unwell, a restroom break, something that might let me step away for a few seconds. Maybe I could even eat one of the disgusting browning apple slices and pretend that made me sick. It never worked on my mother, but Liam. It was during that moment of contemplation, staring at that little plastic box as the sun made sweat start to bead on the back of my neck despite the cold, that I heard a rustle of undergrowth and I looked up. Satyrs on TV, or in books, really do not do the actual creature any justice. On the screen, they were cute little creatures, a perfect hybrid of man and goat. They could even be kind of charming, with their panpipes and that sort of thing. Seeing one in the flesh was entirely different. My eyes kept sliding off of it because my brain was having a hard time even accepting that it was real. Surely this was some sort of trick, like Dr. Frankenstein got bored and decided to try stitching a goat and a human together, while drunk, and even then doing an extremely poor job of it. It did not want to be seen, and a part of me did not want to see it. Satyrs look entirely wrong. Or, no. They look alien. They're not meant to exist in our world. They are alien. In spite of this, I will make my best attempt to describe it. The first thing that hit me, when the creature poked its head from the bushes, was that it was more goat-like than human. I saw the ram's horns next. They were longer than my forearm, counting the point curving back to half-length. Even the human parts looked slightly misshapen. The slightly too long face as though just beginning to be a snout. The eyes just a hair's breadth too far apart. The teeth wide and reminiscent of white gravestones. It sniffed the air, stomping its cloven feet in the dirt before going to the edge of the stream. Its hands looked almost vestigial. Still dexterous, but with only 3 fingers and a stunted thumb instead of 4. The hands cupped the water, and it began to drink. "You're real," I said aloud. I do not know what possessed me. It was exactly as I had anticipated, and yes, nothing can prepare you for actually encountering it. I can only hope it helps silence my lie to the men. The satyr looked up, elven ears twitching. I stared back. From the box, I produced an apple wedge. I held it out. The satyr moved as gracefully as it did not look. Without making any noise, even against the forest debris on the ground, it moved toward me. I fought the urge to move. Its shaggy, gray-white fur was damp, and the satyr smelled of mildew and petrichor. When it got close, it squatted, resting its elbows on its knees to be eye level with me. I swallowed. "Are you hungry?" I took a bite of an apple wedge. It snapped between my teeth, and the satyr's ears flicked at the audible crunch. I held the rest out to him. Slowly, the satyr reached out, taking the apple between its teeth. Its tongue was a hair too long to be natural, and I shivered at the feeling of it ghosting against my fingertips. Then, it leaned in. The satyr poked at my face, at my stomach, sniffing at my clothes. I laughed, ticklish. Maybe laughing offended it. At first, I thought it was just curiosity that made it pull away to get a better look. But when it reared its head back, I had the presence to get out of the way as it tried for a vicious headbutt. The force crushed the bark of the tree behind me. The satyr huffed as I fell onto my back, raising a cloven hoof to stop my head. Before it hit me, a pop reverberated throughout the woods. I got him! Killian exploded from the hunting blind. The satyr fell. A neat, round bullet hole right in the side of its temple. Liam grabbed my elbow, helping lift me to my feet. "You okay?" Yes, I'm fine," I answered. "I thought you said these creatures didn't seem to attack girls." "Well," William smiled sheepishly. He rubbed the back of his neck. "Maybe it was just my sister?" "Are you kidding me? Forget about that," Killian exclaimed. "Help me with this." He took the satyr by its horns. With a grunt of effort, he began to drag it across the ground, its cloven hooves creating a dragging line through the forest floor. Liam took one of the horns and they started to walk faster. They were ram's horns, and it was small enough that they could lift it like they were carrying the handles of a large trunk. "What are you going to do with it?" I asked. "Take photographs? Maybe try to saw its horns off and see if that works," Killian said. "I'd suggest not raving about what you've seen tonight." Are you kidding me? This is a satyr. An actual mythical creature. And you're telling me to just keep quiet about it? I mean, look! I must confess that I was not merely acting when I waved my hands wildly in the direction of the dead satyr. At least, not entirely. Knowing logically the existence of supernatural creatures is a far cry from being attacked by one, seeing it up close, watching its lifeless body as it was dragged away to be dissected like a frog in a middle school science class. I could feel my heartbeat racing and my hand went to my chest. Killian chuckled dryly. "I sympathize. I do," he said. "And Liam picked a good one, I can tell, for you to be this excited. But really, Please try to understand the bigger picture here. He looked back at me. How many people have claimed to see Bigfoot? Or aliens? How many people swear they've seen ghosts? Fact is, a lot of people. I did a little bit of talking, at first, Liam added. But fact is, we don't want people to think we're just a couple of yahoos. Or that you are. What we need is conclusive proof. But if you can't get them on video, then it doesn't matter how many people claim they saw it. So what then? Well, it's not all so bad, Killian said. Of course we're going to keep trying. But I hunt for the thrill of it. At the end of the day, this kill is so rare, people don't even believe it exists. He grinned. And honestly, just knowing that is enough satisfaction on its own. I tried not to betray how it made me feel sick to my stomach. Killian was not going to stop. Not if they enjoyed hunting for its own sake. Truly, it was hard to decide how I felt about the son and father duo. The idea of killing creatures for killing's sake was a bit hard to swallow, certainly. But on the other hand, one of them had just tried to hurt me. This was not exactly Bambi's mother they were shooting. Oh, that's admirable, I drawled out. Killian laughed. No, what's admirable is how well you've taken all this, he answered. Liam, you should bring her around again. Maybe introduce her to your sister, too. God, old man, getting a little ahead of yourself, aren't you? Liam laughed. First, let's just try and get this beast back to the house before we start talking about next time. How far are we from the house? I asked. Oh, not far, Liam answered. Should take a half hour to get back. We've walked this trail so often the past few weeks, as long as we pay attention, we don't get turned around too badly. It's a lot longer than it is wide anyway. Worst comes to worst, we can try and get to the fence and climb over. If it really gets worse, I have a wire cutter. For a while, we stayed silent. We had walked probably about 200 yards or so when Killian heaved a sigh. Hold on, I see some cans. Cans? Sometimes people try to break in, Liam explained. Mostly college kids that want a place to get drunk. They'll leave beer cans, cigarette butts, and it annoys me, Killian finished. Let them down, I'll be right back. They dropped the carcass of the satyr. As Killian walked away to grab the cans, Liam took off his hunting cap. Have a good time? He asked. Sure, I lied. Good, he answered. Bet you didn't expect this when you came into town, huh? He nudged the satyr. I looked anywhere else. Do you think it's an adult? I asked. Nah, looks a little smaller than the other ones we've seen. Probably adolescent. Don't know too much about him, though. Could just be a runt. I knelt and forced my stomach not to lurch. I may not have seen a dead satyr before, but I was a Paranormal Pinkerton. A member of them, anyway, and I was taught to be analytical. I gathered my guts and did a little investigating. I tilted my head and pulled back its lips to reveal its yellow teeth. Omnivorous from the look of his teeth, I remarked. Wasn't sure if the goat thing would make it an herbivore or not. I wonder if they munch on smaller animals. Don't know, he said. Liam pressed his back against the trunk of a tree. Never seen one eat any. Saw one floss its teeth, though. I glared at him. He was grinning, and he held up his hands. I know I said that to sound funny, but I'm not joking, he answered. Last time we were here, Shannon had some fishing line with her. One of them had something stuck in his teeth, and he thought it'd be funny to show it how to use floss. And it worked? She just mimed it and handed over the fishing line. Smart creatures, these things. Didn't give the floss back, but she didn't seem to mind. Maybe that's why they like her so much. I'll keep that in mind. Fitting line dental floss is better for getting on their good side than browning apples. Liam laughed. Listen, I'm sorry I forgot the pack. Hey! We both froze. It sounded like a snap had precipitated it. Liam put himself off from where he had been leaning immediately. Dad? Hey! What's wrong? Come here right now and cut me down. Cut him down? I mouthed to him. Liam shrugged. We followed the sound of Killian's cursing until we pushed our way through the undergrowth and, suspended from a tree with beer cans and cigarette butts strewn below him, Killian was hanging upside down from his ankle. Liam immediately burst out laughing. This isn't funny. It's cutting into my ankle, Killian snapped. You forgot where you set one of your snare traps. Liam wiped his eye with his thumb. You got caught in your own trap. I didn't set this, Killian snapped. Why would I set it here? It's nowhere near the water on any of the trails. Well, I didn't, Liam answered. Here, I'll cut you down. Get a load of my dad, the brilliant hunter. I'm telling you, I have no idea how this got set, Killian groused. It's not even the right cordage. I don't use fishing line for snares. I blinked. Liam. That satyr your sister was messing around with, I said. Did you shoot it? No, Liam said. Dad, she's talking about when Shannon gave that satyr dental floss. They had a moment, so she felt too bad to let us kill it. I remember that, Killian said. It would have been almost comical how he was dangling uselessly from a tree branch. Had I not started to feel a distinct sense of dread. If she wasn't having the baby, I don't think she would have wanted to do it much longer anyway. Liam, they took the fishing line. Yeah. Wait. Liam looked at me. Let me get this straight. You think that satyr took the fishing line, set up a snare, then it gathered up this track, and used it to what? Lure my dad in? My face started to burn. Well, they could have just put it where the track already was. Come on, there's no way they're that smart. Killian rolled his eyes. It looked like he was about to say something in response, when he caught something in the corner of his vision. Shut up, both of you. I didn't hear him. How the hell do you know? I countered. You're killing things until this point you thought didn't exist. Liam was fully invested in our argument. Well, where'd they learn to make a snare then? Something is watching us. Killian struggled against the snare. I don't know. How did humans learn? Both of you cut me down, Killian shouted. Now! We both looked at him. Killian looked freaked out. Liam looked like he was about to make some sort of joke involving his father relaxing when he saw what Killian was looking at. Maybe you should get out of here, Liam said to me. I was not sure if there were more hidden, but there were at least 3 of them looking at us. At most 20, maybe 30 feet away. Satyrs. I could not tell they were there until they were pointed out to me. I did not move. Liam, I said slowly, do what your dad said. Liam pulled his hunting knife. He did not turn his back to the satyrs. It was amazing what a few creatures can be capable of with the right tools. In this case, apparently, fishing line. 2 of them had spears, just sticks crudely sharpened to a point, but one of them had a used piece of the fishing line for a bowstring. 2 of them had spears, just sticks crudely sharpened to a point, but one of them had used a piece of the fishing line for a bowstring. Got it, Liam whispered. He reached up to cut the line. The satyr pulled an arrow back in a drawstring. Killian fell to the ground, his feet free. He's put his palms flat against the ground and was about to push himself to his feet. Before he could so much as get up, the arrow was gone. The arrow hit his shoulder, near the neck. Killian collapsed with a gurgle. Blood started to trickle down from the corner of his mouth. The arrow, from the sound of it, had hit a lung. His eyes rolled back into his head and he stopped moving. Liam put a hand on his shoulder and shook him. "Dad," Liam breathed. "Dad!" He tried to grab him. I grabbed his wrist. "Liam, wait! We have to run." "I can't just leave him here. We can come back for him later. Right now we need to go," I responded, pulling him in the other direction. The satyrs were gone, but if I concentrated, I could see the bushes nearby rustle. They were circling us like sharks. He looked back at the body of Killian McCarthy, at the rustling bushes, then at me. He got up and followed me. His eyes were not present on me. Something was going on in his head. I had seen how Control had handled angry or grieving agents. I would not know what to do until something comes out, if he could not control himself. "Where the hell are you going? We need to get back to the house." "How far are we from the house?" I don't know. How do you not know? It's hard to think." He ground the heel of his hands into his eyes. He was getting angry. I stopped, about to turn when the sound of a gunshot echoed, following the sounds of agitated bird screeches and goat-like bleats. Liam's eyes widened. "He's alive! He grabbed his gun!" Was that why they were not following us? Liam started to move and I pulled him back. "Liam, wait. We need to leave. We need to get help. You know, at least somewhere with cell phone reception. There's a hole in the fence. If we can follow the fence, we'll probably find it before the house." His normally ruddy complexion had gone as pale as ivory. Whatever had been wavering in his head sharpened. Blinking, he asked, "How are you sure there's a hole in the fence?" My eyes widened. I thought I saw it before. We were never near the fence. I didn't know there was a hole in the fence. Jesus, have you been watching us? I stared at him. Slowly, Liam unslung his gun. It was not pointed at me, but it might as well have been. He did not need it. I was well within his bare arm's reach. "Okay, now you're being insane. Insane is following some man you don't even know into the woods. What's your excuse?" I should have known. God, I am an idiot. I have no idea what this has to do with those, but I swear, I have nothing to do with those. Now will you shut up? I snapped. Then I heard it, the sound of a wood creaking, like a bow bending. I covered his mouth and dove, throwing my weight into pushing him down. Liam was either too shocked to stop me, or he realized why I did it, because he was easily large enough to stop me. We hit the ground and rolled into a ditch under a bush, keeping our heads down. The strap had slid off his shoulder, and the gun fell from his hand. "Look," I whispered, "there is a lot to explain, and if I have to explain, fine. But in the meantime, you can either trust them or trust me. Your options are a little limited right now, so either take my advice and trying to get to the fence so we can escape, or deal with them on your own. Your choice." For a moment, Liam did not answer. Whatever had been building behind his eyes had changed. He looked like his father, in spirit. Finally, he looked aside. "Don't move," he hissed. My eyes slowly migrated to follow his own, and I saw the cloven hooves. The stunted hands felt up something I could not see. Flat against the ground, wearing camouflage, both of us had managed to blend in just well enough to not be noticed immediately. Thank God it was facing away from us. I held my breath. I saw them walk away. "Pick a direction, run, and follow the fence until we find a gap in it," I whispered. "On the count of 3, stay low." Liam glared at me, but he held up 3 fingers. 2, 1. Go! I grabbed the rifle as we tried to move. Liam had almost forgotten it. We made it about 20 steps in total before Liam froze and hissed, They flanked us. These things flanked us. And I saw it. From behind us, I could hear them approaching. From in front of us, there were at least 2 more that were taking arrows out of their quivers. Behind us, I heard the satyrs that had killed Killian. We were caught between a rock and a hard place, and I did the only thing I could think to do. I raised the rifle and shot just as one of the satyrs started to aim. Oof! The butt of the weapon smacked into my shoulder so hard that I dropped it. Liam was shouting. The bullet grazed one of the satyrs, because the rest scattered as one screamed. I clutched my shoulder, and as the ringing in my ear subsided, I could hear what Liam was saying. You can't shoot it like that, you'll dislocate your shoulder. I think I did dislocate my shoulder, I hissed. It hurt, and when I moved it, it did not respond how I wanted it to. I hoped it was just bruised. But it worked. They scattered. I turned around to look at him. Oh shit, that one that was gloating got a shot off? Liam was clutching his leg with gritted teeth. The arrow had pierced the skin. Looked to be pretty deep. Deeper than the look of the crude arrow allowed. He tried to staunch the flow of blood. It was close to his tendon. It's fine, he managed to say as he snapped the shaft off near the skin. At least I'm not dead. Let's keep moving. Here. Wait, I'll help you. I made sure his arm was around my shoulder and we started moving again. Slowly. We could not exactly be fast when Liam only had 1 foot he could put weight on. Liam knew that. Maybe you should leave, he suggested. I'll hide and you can bring back help. Dad taught me his tricks. Those things are going to wise up any second and go after us again. Absolutely not, I answered. Don't try and be chivalrous or whatever. It's my fault you got shot with a bow and arrow. No offense, but that's why I don't exactly feel like my odds of survival are better if I go with you, Liam answered. Even if I don't want you to die either. The fact is, I'm useless if I can't run. I stopped. That's fair, I admitted. But if you're the one staying put, you should get the gun to protect yourself, shouldn't you? How fast do you think a goat can run? Liam asked. Confused, I just stared at him. Probably faster than you, he amended. They're going to chase you. Let me see the rifle for a second. I handed it to him. Keep it snug against your shoulder. Like this. Right hand holding the forestock. Keep your elbow pointed down. You won't break your clavicle that way. Got it? I swallowed. Yeah. Okay. I think I do. And whatever you do, with the experience you have, don't shoot in my direction, please. I'm going to want answers from you. I bit the inside of my cheek. Noted. Get on the ground and... I don't know, try to blend in. Liam drew himself prone on the forest floor and then wriggled into bushes. I could not see him within a moment. I hoped that would be enough to keep their attention off of him. I could hear the rustling sound of people walking again. Or could it be animals? I was getting paranoid. Maybe. Or I would have been if another arrow did not miss my face by about an inch. I picked an approximate direction and fired. The bleeding started again. I took about 3 steps backwards before I turned and started sprinting. I was already tired. I had been training for a position that required me to sit in front of a computer screen, reading files or listening to audio logs. Nothing that required physical conditioning. I am not, to put it mildly, well equipped to sprint away from a pack of murderous, bow-wielding satyrs. On the other hand, satyrs were not well equipped to surviving after being shot. The situation was dire, but not hopeless. I took another shot, pressing the stock against my shoulder and turning around just long enough to fire at one that had gotten too close. Missed again. They stopped and scrambled around for a moment. I turned and kept running, trying to ignore the burning sensation that was starting to creep into my lungs. My plan, if it could really be called a plan at all, was to try and climb the fence. If they were slower to climb a chain-link fence than I was, I could get help. Explanations were easy enough to give. A wild animal had attacked. A bear, maybe. Killian was a weird man with a weird reputation. A hunting trip and his traps went wrong. It was not even really a lie, was it? The fence was not that far. The property was longer than it was wide. A quarter of a mile away at most. Satyrs seemed wary of getting too close to me with the rifle, for now. My only guess as to how creatures with the running speed of a goat could not catch up to a girl with mediocre stamina at best. By the time I reached the fence, I was already so out of breath that I had to pause for a fraction of a second before I slung the rifle over my good shoulder and jumped. My fingers threaded to the small gaps in the chain link, and I gritted my teeth. The shoulder that I had dislocated somehow both hurt like hell and felt numb and tingly, like I had slept on it all night. Could not even make it halfway up when my arm gave out. What was I supposed to do? Scale a tall fence with one hand? I was either the unluckiest person alive or the luckiest. Unlucky because I had dislocated my shoulder, and I could not climb the only thing standing between me and getting help. Lucky because as soon as I let go and dropped back to the ground, an arrow hit the fence where my head would have been. I turned to face the satyrs. They were dancing in and out of the bushes 10 feet away, looking at me and my rifle. I grabbed the weapon again. At least when they were getting close, there was less of a chance to miss. But how close they were, it would be damned hard to miss. Click. My mouth went dry with panic. There were no bullets left in the gun. They were close enough now that I could pay attention to their faces. One of them had dried blood on his muzzle. It must have been the one that attacked Killian. Most of their arrows were gone, having wasted them trying to hit me, but one had brought a spear. I did the only thing I could think of. I lifted the rifle like a club and grimaced. A pretty pathetic-looking last stand. A girl with a bum shoulder trying to hold off a group of 5 creatures with a gun she knew she was barely able to swing. I was going to try it anyway. What else was I supposed to do? I was not going to give up and die without a fight. The only thing I had going for me was that adrenaline might let me get one good hit in. It was not a bang I heard. The sound interrupted things right before a satyr got close enough for me to swing. It was more like a pop. Like the muted sound Liam and I had assumed was Killian shooting, muffled by distance in the forest itself. That could not have been the case now, because the closest satyr dropped dead. 2 more pops shot off in quick succession. One missed, one satyr fell, and the last couple seemed to be intelligent enough to decide that it was better to just drop everything and run, trotting off as fast as it could into the bushes. Killian, I said. Mr. McCarthy? It did not seem possible. He looked pretty damn dead when he was collapsed over with blood dripping from him. But who else had a gun? Hate to tell you this, kid, but he's dead. It is hard to describe how it felt in that moment, when I realized I was looking at Detective Hawk. Relief, sure, was the predominant emotion. Then a feeling of dread. Like a child that was just caught doing something and they knew their mom would find out. Then shame over that. Was that not what was happening after all? Hawk did not actually sound like he hated to tell me that. He did not sound like he particularly wanted to be there at all. Did not look like it either. With his rumpled slate gray flannel shirt, and his hair that stuck out at one odd angle like someone had molded a clay sculpture, Hawk looked like he had either stayed awake for days or had just rolled out of bed after a night of heavy drinking. My suspicions were only confirmed when he looked like he took out a flask. "Are you drinking?" Hawk did not look at me as he started to examine a few of the corpses. "I don't think you should be giving flack for not doing my job right," he said. He looked at me, finally. "You're her, aren't you? The heir?" I bit my lip. "You said you were leaving this alone." "I knew it. Control has been losing her mind. Call her before she has to go into early retirement." I crossed my arms. I wanted to argue with him, somehow. But I also was willing to admit when I was very wrong. Thank you for helping me. Yeah, well, I've been camping out here for days now, waiting for something to hit the fan. So I guess you've been helpful that way, he drawled, before taking out his phone. He spoke in his usual tired monotone. Paranormal Pinkerton Detective Ryan Hawk. 3 satyrs shot dead. 2 human casualties. 1 dead. 1 injured and possibly dead. 1... He looked at me. He flinched as something loud came over the line. The air showed up. But he's fine, he finished, shutting it off. I'll finish this later. Hawk took another drink from his flask before he looked at me. He tossed it. Here. You look like you could use it. I caught it. My hands were shaking, and I struggled to get the cap off. Even then, I was not actually in the mood for a drink. So you've been here the whole time? I've been here since I made my last report, trying to figure out where the rift is. Heard screaming, and by the time I managed to trample my way there, the whole group was on that McCarthy guy. Poor bastard. I managed to get a few shots off with my pistol, but not after I took a good chunk out of him. So that was the gun we heard. They ate him? Of course they did. Satyrs are like piranhas. They'll eat anything they can get in their mouths, Hawk answered. As he spoke, he reloaded his pistol. I finally sat down. I'm going to be sick, I gasped. Hawk shrugged, looking around the area. If you are, then make it quick, he said. Found your friend. He pointed me in the direction you went. Better find him before it's 2 deaths instead of just 1. I swallowed down the bile that was starting to creep up my throat. Detective Hawk was right. I had to keep it together. More importantly, I had to go home. I finally stood and, reluctantly, I took a sip from the flask and spit it out. Coffee? And the blackest coffee I had ever tasted, too. I don't drink on the job, Hawk remarked. I just stay awake. He had started taking pictures of the 3 bodies. Looking at me, he pocketed his phone. They won't show up on the phone for long, I told him. Useful to time how long it'll take, he answered. The longer the photo doesn't disappear, the closer we are to the epicenter. I put my hands on my hips. And the rift? Hopefully. I took a deep breath. So, what now? You're coming with me. I am? Hawk walked forward. He grabbed my wrist. You want to be a paranormal Pinkerton? I'll show you how to be one. You're helping me with damage control, and you need to make your own statement. He started to drag me away. And I can call my mom? I asked softly. Hawk looked back at me. Maybe it was my imagination, but he did not look quite so aloof. In fact, he might have even looked sorry for me. Any other time, I might have been angry at that. If the lull in relative safety had not allowed my mind to finally process what had just happened to me. He checked his phone again. You can call her when we find reception, he said. He looked away again. You're only coming with me because the next bus doesn't leave until tomorrow morning. Unless you want to sit at a bus stop for 12 hours. We're stuck together for now. There were a lot of moments I regret. The moment I decided to do this to begin with, that was the worst offender. But there were other moments, smaller moments that still keep me awake at night. The next one was me not being willing to wait for that bus.
Pinkerton's Ghosts is a podcast distributed by Superversive Radio, licensed under an attribution non-commercial, share-alike international license. This episode was written by Mariel Marquetta and performed by the same. Ben Wheeler edits, directs, produces, and herds cats. Ken Dickerson performs our audio editing. Visit us on Facebook, read articles on superversivesf.com, or listen to us on Unauthorized, Acast, iTunes, or Spotify. Contact us through Twitter at @PinkertonsGhost, email us at pinkertonsghosts@gmail.com, or send us noble messenger possums with messages strapped to their backs. Don't worry, they know how to find us. Thank you for listening, and good luck.